Welcome everyone to the mini pause. This is our Q&A series where we take a bit of time out in the week to meet women who are tackling menopause on their own terms. I'm Karen Podesta. I am the project lead for TLC's networking project in association with Sports England and This Girl Can. This is an initiative we've been running since the start of the year to two reasons: to keep the menopause conversation alive and also encourage anyone experiencing symptoms of peri or meno, and also those who are curious to learn more, to move more and feel better. And as a perimenopausal woman, I am delighted to be leading this project because it helps me out as well. We started this series to hear more from those who are already sharing their experience of menopause in inspiring ways, but I must stress that we are not medical experts. This is really just a space for sharing lived experiences, although in the future it would be nice if we could get a medical expert on the Q&A, so we'll we'll work on that. And then just a bit of housekeeping. We'll have a bit of time for questions at the end. If any questions come up during the chat, just pop them into the chat box and then I'll refer back to them at the end. Also, because it's being recorded, if everyone could mute themselves just so the sound quality is great for everyone watching. And then obviously, again, if you've got a question at the end, you can unmute yourselves if you want to ask your question publicly. If you just want to put it in the chat and you prefer me to read it out, that's also fine. And as I said, please feel free to turn off your screen if that makes you feel more comfy. So that is the housekeeping out of the way. So today we are joined by Dawn, Collinson and Susan Lee from the Menopod podcast. The podcast addresses issues affecting women in midlife with honesty and humour. In Sue's own words, as I read, but you could correct me, it's a bit like Loose Women, but with gin in our mugs instead of cups of tea, which I think we can all relate to. And their brilliant podcast covers everything from fashion, diet and dating to sex, symptoms and misinformation. So I'm really, really happy here to have you both here to answer my questions and everyone else's questions. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce yourselves briefly?
You go first. Away. Oh, it's one of those. Okay, hello, my name's Susan Lee. I work for Reach PLC, which is the parent company of lots of titles, including the Mirror, the Express, and lots of regional titles. I'm Group Wire editor over there. But this project is something that came about really just because me and Dawn were sat having a cup of tea, or possibly more like a glass of wine, and started to talk about our own lives, what we were experiencing, what our friends were experiencing. And we kind of came to the conclusion that although menopause is much more front and centre these days, certainly, you know, compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly on mum and dad's time, it still was surrounded by a lot of myths, some taboos still, and also there was an awful lot of celebrity stuff around it, which was great, but we didn't quite know whether that spoke to people like us. Oh, and here comes my cup of coffee from my husband, thank you very much. So we decided that we would do a podcast supported by Laudable and Reach to address perimenopause and menopause, but not in a heavyweight medical kind of way, not in a sort of a formal sort of way, but in a much more relaxed, the sort of thing that you would do if you were in a cafe over a slice of cake, down the pub having a glass of wine, talking about it honestly and hopefully funnily, because as you know, as grim as some women do find it, actually there's quite a lot of positives to going through perimenopause and menopause and coming out the other side. So that's me. Dawn?
Yeah, well, Sue and I worked together for, I was trying to think how long it was, and I think it was about 20 years. So we were.
Can you stop probably, that? Stop it. Stop with the 20 years thing.
So we were probably in our early 30s, late 20s when we met. We were both features. I think Sue might have been women's editor at the time for the Echo. I joined them as a features writer, and then we worked together for such a long time, and then people's roles change, and 6 years ago myself and another one of our friends took redundancy and went off to go and set up a freelance company. So we're copywriters. So we still work sometimes with Sue because we write for national papers and magazines and for regional papers, and we do a bit of PRing around there to pay the bills. But so that's what we basically did sort of the same job for quite a long time, and now we do a slightly similar job, but not entirely the same. So yeah, and Sue kind of, I think, had the thought of Menopod and came and said to me, I think it would be nice if we did this. Do you fancy doing it with me? And we are always quite good at chatting together. And we thought, right, okay, let's just do it where it's basically sort of like us just chatting, but then we get guests in who chat with us as if we were all just sitting, you know, having a nice little drink together and asking them things, and just kind of hopefully getting a little bit of information across in a relaxed sort of way, and just making it so it isn't like such an onerous thing. Because I think lots of women, the only time they will ever talk about their menopausal symptoms is if they go to their GP, and they wouldn't necessarily bring it up amongst friends, whereas we just talk about it all the time. Not all the time, but you know, we kind of, I think we're so used to talking about it now that we don't think twice about it, and I think a lot of our friends are the same, and that was the kind of feeling that we wanted to share so that maybe other women could feel the same way. So that was where it came about.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's really obvious if you listen to the podcast that you are friends. It just comes across really, really well. In terms of the podcast itself, how if anyone's interested in starting their own podcast, like how did that all come about? What was the process of bringing it from the idea to what we can listen to now?
That's because Sue's well connected.
Well, hardly. I just bought somebody a piece of cake and it all went from there. No, so Reach, to be fair, the idea of the podcast arrived at the same time as Reach was joining forces with someone called Laudable, which is a podcast platform, and backed by Google as well. So it's kind of a joint enterprise between Reach and Google. There was some money around. I approached the lady in Reach who was looking after that and said, look, you know, I'm interested in doing this podcast. Myself and my partner, friend, chum, colleague, what are you, Dawn? Anyway, me mate, think we could do this. We've got a rough schedule of the kind of things that we'd like to do. What do you think? And she took it away, spoke to various people with the money, and said yes. And it was just fortuitous that she was setting up between Reach and Google this Laudable project, and there was money behind it. So we have our own producer, which is great. We've got some nice kit that we can use. Pre-pandemic, we had a lovely studio that we used to go into that we, you know, couldn't bring any tea or coffee or anything into lest we spilt it, because I'm such a klutz. That would absolutely happen and cause thousands of pounds worth of damage. But I would say that, I mean, that all sounds very formal and oh, well, that's not for me. Actually, doing a podcast has never been easier. I'm not very techie at all. Thank goodness we have a producer who is. But if you feel very strongly about something and you want to do your own podcast, it is a relatively simple thing to do these days. 5 years ago, maybe not so much. Now podcasts are big news. And just like sort of journalism has ceased to be just about journalists. Now, I mean, Dawn and I laugh that everyone can be a journalist now because everyone's got a smartphone. Everyone's got, you know, everyone has access to the net and what have you. Similarly, anyone can do a podcast. It's not that hard. Yes, you have to have a little bit of tech set up, but again, not massively. You can use your smartphone. I think the most important thing is that you've got to be passionate about your subject, and want to tell people about your subject and can talk about it in a accessible sort of way. So yeah, it was just good fortune for Dawn and I that it just landed at the right time that this project was happening. And we're now 2 seasons in and we've won an award, haven't we, mate?
Honestly, God, no one was more surprised than we were So much so that I was sat on my sofa and Sue had said to me, there's these online tickets, we've been nominated for this award, do you want to get a ticket? And then I forgot to get a ticket, and then I got a ticket at the last minute, and then I'd forgotten what time it was. Sue was on a beach in Cornwall accepting the award. So so it's all a nice little setup and everyone's there very formally accepting the award, and then they cut to Sue, who's clearly got a beach behind her, and she's like, oh, thanks very much for the award, like this. And it could not more have said, we thought we had no chance of winning, because we were up against national newspapers and national magazines, and we just thought we were in for the ride, didn't we? And we were like, oh, isn't it lovely to be nominated? We'll not win. And then the next thing you know, Sue's in Cornwall like that, going, yay, we've won like this. I have not got the award. Sue has the award. Sue, is it behind you?
Bear with.
So I was allowed to see the award. There it is. Obviously, Sue takes it to bed with her. I've been allowed to see it once.
You're clearly very, very upset by it. I'll bring it the next time we see it. To be fair, it's plastic. Do you know what I mean? It's not an Oscar. It's not an Oscar. But you know what? We were very grateful and very pleased, weren't we?
And we did sit and have a celebratory dinner in the quarter, which I'm sure everybody knows where it is. And we sat it in the middle of the table, so people would come over and ask us about it. We were like, that. We didn't care. We didn't get to go to a ceremony. We didn't get to wear a nice frock. We're putting it on the table, so everybody who passes goes, oh, you've got a trophy. Oh, that little thing, yeah. So that was our moment of glory.
That's so great. How much of your own menopause journey do you share in the podcast, and are you happy to talk a little bit about that now?
Go on, Dawn.
Go on. I think we do, because I actually think it's kind of important if you're asking other people to open up about things, that you've got to be prepared to match like for like, really. I don't think it'd be very conducive to openness if we went, share all that you're going through. Oh no, we don't want to talk about ours. So I think the thing is we do try and talk to people and just chat it through, because one of the things that I think everybody who starts to go through perimenopause and menopause discovers is there are so many symptoms, just unlike lots of ailments or lots of conditions, lots of things where there's kind of a sort of checklist of things that are likely to happen to you if you've got them. If you're going through this, these are the things that might happen to you. Oh my word, with the menopause and the perimenopause, it would be as long as your arm and then some, and it's like a pick and mix. So you won't get all of them. You might just get number 3 and number 7 and number 12. And so I think what we did was, the more we talked about the things that we were getting, it sort of added into this mix. So people thought, oh, actually, I didn't have that. Oh, but I've got that. And I think it's that was one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about ours, just in case mine wasn't the same as Sue's, which wasn't the same as another lady's, because literally everyone seems to be different. I've not come across 2 people who've had identical experiences at all. And I think it's that feeling that all these little combinations of symptoms that are happening to you, well, that's okay. It's unique, but actually that one's happening to her and that one's happening to her, and then it kind of pieces together into your experience. So yeah, in summary, we do talk about what happened to us, but what is happening to us, just to put it out there, basically, don't we?
But the good thing is, it's pre-recorded, so there have been, I can think of maybe 1 or 2 occasions where we said something not necessarily about what's happened to us, but we may have referred to somebody else or perhaps our partners, and we've gone, oh, hang on a minute, wait a minute, it's recorded, we'll leave that little bit out. But I would say
we navigated around the sex one quite carefully.
Yes, we did, because it wasn't just about us. Yeah. It involves other people. But Dawn's right. How can you ask other people to share and be open if you're not open? So I would say that we are, yes, open to the point of brutality. Sometimes our podcast producer goes, really? You really want to say? Yes, we'll say that. We don't care. We're just a little bit mindful, obviously, if it infects our partners, then we're or somebody else that we haven't had permission to talk about, then we're careful. But no, most of the time, anything goes. We'll talk about anything.
We just want to avoid a domestic, don't we, basically?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's probably best. So we know the podcast has been critically well received. In terms of everyone surrounding you, like friends, family, colleagues, have you found that it's kind of opened a floodgate for them coming to you for either with questions, stories, comments?
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that. Only this morning, somebody who I work with, who's quite senior, to be honest, who I don't know very well, but you know, it's one of those, I have a G chat with her every now and again. So she's the equivalent to a neighbour who I might wave at. Out of the blue, got in touch and said, "When's the next series of the podcast?" And I was like, oh, okay. And just started to tell me all about her symptoms in quite, you know, intimate detail. And I find that happens a lot, both from a professional, formal kind of way, because they know me and Dawn do the podcast, but also our friends, you know, regularly talk to us about it. But I've been surprised, I don't know about Dawn, that people, once they know you're doing this, I think it's such even though it's so well talked about, it's still relatively untapped in a lot of women. So I think they find it a relief that they can talk to somebody who's just like them. Davina McCall's great, or, you know, who's the woman who does the Gloop? Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah, she's great as well, but she's not like us, is she? Do you know what I mean? And Davina's great, but she's not like us. Whereas I think doing that podcast has absolutely given people an opportunity, certainly with me, just to G-chat me out of the blue, to go, yeah, you do that podcast. Let me tell you about this. Or you should do an episode on X, or my friend is experiencing this. Can you do something on it? So, and that's great because it's a two-way conversation. It's not a one-way one.
Brilliant. Yeah. Have you ever had anyone come to you with almost like a positive outcome as a result of the podcast? So they listen to a specific podcast or the series and, you know, it's helped them address something, or talk to their doctor, or talk to their partner, or talk to their family more about it?
I've had a couple of friends who said, and I'll tell you which episode it was in the first series where we spoke to Dr. Paula, and she was talking about HRT. She's quite an advocate of it, but I've got a couple of friends who said, oh, we listened to that and then went to see our GP to discuss it a little bit more. Not that they kind of went, oh, we must go on HRT because Dr. Paula says so, but just because I think it maybe reassured them a little sufficiently to go and discuss it a little bit more and to just explore it. Because one of the hardest things, I think, is having that first conversation, especially post-pandemic, because I think, like lots of people with lots of things, women going through the menopause go, oh, I'll not waste the doctor's time. They're busy enough. I'll not go and bother them with that. And I think, again, it's one of those things where it should really be taken as seriously as something else. You know, it's not like to lots of women, it's not a minor dismissive thing. It can be a thing that really impacts quite significantly on their everyday life. And so there's no point in just thinking, I'll stoically soldier on just because the GPs are very busy. You know, if it is impacting on you, you need to get out there and get heard. And so, yeah, so a couple of friends definitely said after that particular episode that they'd gone to discuss HRT. And again, it's just about opening up these little lines of conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as Sue alluded to earlier, obviously there's been this kind of powerful menopause movement that seems to be continuously growing, really. It seems like every week now there's something in the news about menopause, which is fantastic. In this week's newsletter that we send out, and I'll talk more about that at the end, there was a story about how a group of male MPs tried on a new like vest with patches in so they could experience like a simulated hot flush.
Really?
It was in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, they absolutely hated it. And they are now opening up a conversation about how menopause is an economic issue, because they got to experience firsthand about how that might affect your working day, or being able to come to work or do things like that. So I think that's been absolutely brilliant. On the flip side, I've also seen articles by people saying, stop talking about the menopause, it's scaring people. It's I think it's when I think we went through a phase where almost every week I was sending Lauren from TLC another headline that I'd seen that was just like, stop flapping on about the menopause, and absolutely ridiculous headlines. But I guess like anything, if it's being talked about, rather than not being talked about.
Karen, that some of that was from women as well.
Really?
It was all from women. It was all from women.
Oh, you see, but ignorance isn't bliss, is it? Because then you go headlong into something and you don't know what to expect. So just by ignoring it doesn't mean, I'll avoid it then. If it was that easy, we'd all ignore it. It would be like, oh, it's okay, I'll just look the other way and then the menopause will pass me by, it'll be fine. Just think, the more you know and the more prepared you are, the more you the more you know what you're dealing with. And then...
But it also it feeds into something I think much bigger, and that's older women in society and older women in the workplace. And I know what you mean. I've had people and seen headlines of people, they're banging on against the menopause again, yada, yada, yada. Have we heard all we need to know about it? Answer, no, we haven't, because we are overturning decades of silence and an attitude that says HRT, well, that's just a lifestyle choice, isn't it? No, but there are still women who go to the doctors, thousands of them, who will say, I feel like this, I'm anxious and depressed, and they will get antidepressants. Nobody will say, hang on a minute, how old are you? Is it hormone related depression and anxiety? No, they'll just be given Prozac or whatever. There's a whole conversation around women not just going through the menopause, but older women, their place in society, how society views them, the value they place on them in the workplace. So I know what you mean. But I open the Daily Mail and go, oh, look, it's somebody else wanging on about the menopause again, like us. But I don't think we can talk about it enough. I really don't. I think we've got to talk about it in very, in specific ways. And I'm not sure men trying on hot patches, well done them kind of thing. But there's a lot of, talking the talk. We need to walk the walk. We need some action, and we need some positive outcomes from this rather than just talking about it. So as you can see, I'm off on one. I think I've come over all hot because I feel so strongly about it.
No, you're absolutely right. What would you say is the most valuable thing that you've learned since starting the podcast?
I'll tell you who I found to be one of the most interesting guests that we had, and it was actually a girl who we'd worked with, Jane Gallagher, and she came on, and the episode was basically about reinvention, because although the menopause is kind of, not everything that we discuss is specifically medically related to the menopause, so a lot of it is lifestyle issues around women who are of a menopausal age. And one of the things that Jane talked about was about reinvention, and I think she said, and we agreed, that lots of women who get into their 40s and 50s, when you hit the menopause, it can almost be presented to you like the end of something, because biologically it is the end of something. And she said, that can psychologically impact on lots of women, because you feel the medical changes, but then psychologically you feel it's something that's over in your life. And what she did was, and we knew her quite well, she's got 3 or 4 children. I've said that now and it makes me sound like I don't know her at all.
No, 4 kids and a granddaughter.
4,
how did that
that's right. And she basically took the opportunity of empty nest syndrome, which was something else that we discussed, and her kids growing up and getting their own lives and leaving home, to kind of reevaluate what she wanted and what she had thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to just do something different, because I'm not tied to, picking the kids up from school, or I'm not tied to paying for university, contributing towards university fees anymore. And I feel a bit liberated from that. And actually, she didn't just reinvent herself once. She was like Madonna. She rattled through different careers, and she went and taught prisoners English in Walton Jail. And she went and taught in schools, but she then became a yoga teacher, and she taught kids yoga and she taught adults yoga. And so she basically tried on different work lives. And she said she was able to do that because she was the age she was. And so being the age she was meant that she had more life experience, but also in many ways fewer responsibilities. So fewer family responsibilities and things like that. And it was so nice to hear somebody who saw it as maybe like a springboard to the start of something, rather than going to the end of something, which I think it can be you often see it painted like that in slightly doomy terms. And so, yeah, Jane was my favourite person, I think, because she didn't necessarily talk about something medical. She talked about a mindset which came with being a particular age and going through this process. And I thought it was so positive. And I know it's hard to be positive all the time, but she'd almost forced herself to be positive and seen the pluses of it, and not just seen them, but then acted on them, which I thought was really interesting and made you go, oh, yeah.
And the best thing about Jane is she's not, because we're not all able to, try different jobs, quit jobs. Do you know what I mean? We're not, maybe not all in that position, but Jane's dead ordinary. I hope she doesn't mind me saying that if she's listening.
Not in any way loaded, is she?
No, she's just
a journalist.
Ordinary woman, exactly, with 4 kids. And like Dawn says, and that was at the heart of what we wanted to do with the podcast. Yes, you want to impart information. Yes, you want it to be a forum to discuss things. But actually, it going through the perimenopause and the menopause for a lot of women it can be a positive experience at the end of it. Sometimes it's bumpy along the way. Sometimes it's not. Some women sail through it. But ultimately, when you're out the other side, you're in a different chapter. And we wanted to try and help women make the most of that chapter. And Jane was a brilliant, brilliant example of someone very ordinary who did just that. And there's lots of other examples out there of women who've just gone, right, you're right, kids are off my hands, or even, my marriage is over, or whatever. I've ceased to be a carer, and now this is my time. This is my time. And crucially, I don't have to worry about getting pregnant. I don't have to worry about contraception, yada, yada, yada. It's a springboard for something else. So yeah, no, Jane was my favourite as well.
Fantastic. So tell you what we'll do. We've got one question here. We'll jump into that, and then I've got some additional ones if we need to. So Jenny has said, given the symptoms are so different for each of us, do you have any hints about how to know if you're perimenopausal? I assume that once your periods are becoming less regular, you're already some way through that journey, and it's hindsight that then makes the myriad of apparently unrelated symptoms all make sense. I can touch on that slightly, and then I'll open up to Dawn and Sue. So for me personally, what happened was I had been experiencing lots of different symptoms that I'd attributed to COVID. I attributed to having gone through IVF. I'd just kind of come up with an excuse for a number of symptoms over the years. And it was when I got brain fog, and that was the most uncharacteristic thing for me. And it was so bad that I suddenly just went, something's not right here. So I read a book called The Perimenopause Solution by Dr. Shazadi Harper. And that's got a great list of probably about 56 different symptoms. And as I started, and again, that's not exclusive, but as I started to read that book, I suddenly went, okay, feeling low and depressed, which again is very uncharacteristic for me, might not be to do with COVID. It might be a bit to do with COVID, but it's probably this. And then, those dizzy spells, I'd made up, hadn't seen a doctor, but I'd made up that it was because a few years ago I'd had IVF, and I was like, well, that surely, mixed a few things around in my body, so it must be that. And I'd just unwittingly given a reason to all these things without seeking any kind of medical attention. And when I read it all in one book, I was like, okay. But it actually made me feel really at ease about it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this explains the past 4 years of my life. And that's how I kind of came to it. And then I felt really comfortable talking to my doctor about it. Dawn and Sue?
I think that's one of the things you do notice. And it was interesting when you said it was things that felt uncharacteristic to me.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing that probably triggered me as well, was thinking, this is just not like me. And I have a friend who has the same symptom as me, which is it's a slightly weird do me thing. And I say that and somebody says,
a do me thing. It's not like a medical expression, a do me thing.
But someone said to me, oh, that's like a depression. I'm like, no, it's really not. It's a sense of weird dread. And I'm somebody who's massively optimistic and energetic and whatever. And I said, I can't explain it. And a very, very close friend of mine went to me, I have exactly the same. And actually, it goes as quickly as it came. And it's often in the first thing in the morning. And I don't know whether it's a build-up of hormones or what. And then it goes. And once again, what you said rang with me, because once I knew what was causing it, I didn't worry about it anymore. And that in itself then almost helped to override it, because I could rationalize it then. I could get up, and when I felt that way, think, oh, this is a symptom, and wait for it to ride out. And sure enough, it would. And I think so. It was a combination of something that was uncharacteristic, and then realizing that's what it could be attributed to. Actually, was very calming in itself then, because I could think, yeah, that's what it is. I'll wait for that to go because I know it will. And it always did. And my friend was almost exactly the same, a very close friend. So what would be the chances? Not to.
I get that as well. I haven't yet told my partner this, but sometimes I'll wake up, and this has only been happening the last couple of years, and I'll wake up and I'll look at him and I'll think, one day in our future I might wake up and you'll be dead in the bed next to me, which is delightful. How delightful is that? But I could laugh about it, because I caught myself having that thought, and I was like, where the hell did that come from?
It's random catastrophizing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Random catastrophizing, and that's exactly it. And yet Sue that's the weird thing, Sue may never have experienced that. Now, I've never had the flushes, but Sue has. And so again, it's that thing where you go, could you not just give us a list of things that we could have, and then we'd know?
I think it's interesting what Jenny says, that you're doing them in hindsight almost. So, Jenny's saying there,
piecing them together.
Periods become less regular. Well, my periods have always been all over the show. My periods have never been regular. So, yeah, they were a little bit less regular. Well, yeah. But Dawn's right. It was when I was sitting in the office going, but not just, oh, I'm a little bit hot, because that kind of minimizes it. It's like a slow burn from your toes upwards. And I've lost count of the number of times I sat in the office going, delicately trying to dab me upper top lip. I'm feeling sweat running down my back. I'm thinking, God, am I coming down with something? Am I coming down with a cold? And then of course it'd go, and then you're freezing because you're all sweaty. And actually what you want to do is go and have a shower, but you can't because you're in a meeting in half an hour. So but Jenny's right. It's only in hindsight for many women that you think, oh, hang on a minute. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, hang on a minute. And you start to join the dots, and you think, right, I get what's going on. But I would think, I mean, I've got no basis for this, but 50% of women will have no idea that they've gone into perimenopause, because we're busy women. We've got homes and careers and jobs and kids and yada, yada, yada. And it's only when, like Dawn says, you start to piece it together and you think, actually, that's not like me. It may dawn on you that maybe that's what it is. And you know what, that's part of the podcast, isn't it? To start those conversations so people are aware of the 30, 40, 628 million symptoms that come with the perimenopause and the menopause itself.
I think one of the beauties of being our age is,
your age, Dawn. Your age.
Yeah.
You're older than me.
A little bit. But you know yourself. So you know yourself physically, and you know yourself emotionally, and you know what is normal to you. And when something just jars a bit, then you go, oh, hang on. And it's either something physical and you should go to the doctors and get it checked out. But I just think, we are very familiar with ourselves by this age, and you know what's you and when something's not you. But all the way through the pandemic, I thought it was really interesting because every few weeks we'd get, here are the new symptoms of Omicron you need to look out for. So by the time COVID came, we knew every symptom under the sun. I mean, and there was a comprehensive list of them, wasn't it? And it was everywhere. It was shared everywhere. You know, you couldn't avoid it. Equally, how many times do you see shared on social media the things to look out for when you're checking moles, which is great because, you know, super important for everybody to check it. You very rarely see this is a list of the symptoms which you may have if you are perimenopausal. You know, if you've got these symptoms, this could be what it is. And I think it would be so much better for so many women to have a bigger awareness of the possible symptoms, in the way that, like I said, with COVID, we knew what we knew. It was the cough, we knew it was the this, we knew it was but by the end of all these variants, God, there was a cast of thousands, wasn't there, for symptoms, because every variant brought its own new symptoms. But they were shared over and over again. You couldn't miss them in the media. And I think that's what women don't have, is that they don't have that. You're not being bombarded with the information, actually, that would be really helpful, because for every woman who it's not relevant to, there'll be a lot of women who will go, oh, maybe that is me, and click on it and just see the symptoms listed out there super clearly and go, actually, I've ticked off 6 of those, that's me.
But you know what, Dawn? Why would there be? It only affects half the population.
Yeah.
Why would there be a list of symptoms that affects half out there? Do you know what I mean? It's madness. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I'm always right.
I think that you are always right.
It's a burden.
But it feeds into. I think it still feeds into that thing that the menopause is something, you know, that you're
niche,
right? Huh?
And a bit niche.
Bit, you know what I mean?
Don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. But it used to be like that. My mother never talked about the menopause. You know, it just wasn't on the agenda. I've no idea how she went through it, whether she went through it well or otherwise. I couldn't say. We didn't talk about it. We're in a different place now. But as I said earlier on, I still think we've got a long way to go. And your point there, I think, is really, really relevant. This is something that affects, is it 51% of the population or 49? I can't remember. A hell of a lot of us. And yet there is still such a lot of misinformation and uncertainty around it.
Yeah.
Can I
ask you a question though? I've just thought.
Me?
So I have a boy. So, and only one child. I have a boy. Sue has a boy and a girl. How does, you said your mum never talked about it. How does Gina, who is 22, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
How does Gina feel about you talking about it quite so openly?
Oh, couldn't care less.
Is she interested?
Yeah, she is. Yeah,
is she?
Yeah, she is. Yes, she is. I mean, she doesn't grill me about it.
No.
But she knows about the podcast. She's listened to a couple of the podcasts. I think, the generational difference between her and me is enormous. I would never have approached my mum to go, how are you feeling, mum? How tell me about the menopause. Whereas, I didn't talk to her about periods or anything like that. Gina, I can't shut her up. She's always ringing me about this, that, or the other, some medical incident she wants to discuss with me, or whether this is right or that's right. She talks to me about her contraceptive choices, and she talks to me about the podcast. So yeah, I think the generation, it's not the generation down, is it the generation beyond? Oh, I don't know. I'm 55. Yeah. Is it the next generation?
Yeah.
I just aged myself horribly. Anyway,
yeah.
It's the next. Women in their 20s, I think, are far more comfortable talking about it than they were. But I still think there's a long way to go. I do.
But that's the point at which they should be receiving the information as well, because by the time you get to our age, you're like, well, I'm in it now. So yeah, thanks, but I'm in it. Whereas kind of, it's not to be, like you said, somebody said, stop it, you're scaring people now. Well, actually, the more you know, the less you will be scared when it does happen to you. So if you're aware of what's coming when you're in your 20s and 30s or whatever, that, when you get to your 40s and 50s, this is what happens. You're kind of a little bit more okay about it because you've got your head around it. You've had 20 years to get your head around it. It doesn't hit you like a bus overnight.
There's a movement to put it on the national curriculum, and I don't know how far along we are with that. But, girls learn about biology, they learn about reproduction, contraception, periods, what have you. Well, why shouldn't they learn about the menopause? Why?
Oh,
Well,
totally.
boys and girls, both sexes. You learn all about when you're 14. You learn all about, you know, how babies are made or whatever. Why aren't you also learning in those biology classes or you know, personal development classes about what your older sisters or your mum or your grandma might be going through?
Yeah, I think that's why these conversations are so important. I recently spoke to some student nurses who said that in the 3 years of their course, menopause hadn't been mentioned once.
Really?
And they decided to do their final project on menopause to address that and hopefully create a bit of a shift. But I just want to check in on Sue, because I know you said you might only have a bit of limited time.
Yeah, I've got a couple more minutes. Is that all right? I'm just mindful I've got a meeting at 2 o'clock that I've got to prepare for.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
In a rather pain in the backside kind of way, but anyway.
Does anyone either want to pop another question into the chat or unmute yourself to ask a question? No, that's fine.
Oh, hang
Jenny,
on, there is a question.
Yeah, I was just going to make a point. It's really interesting. Thank you. I'm Margaret. I am from Liverpool, but I'm not in Liverpool at the minute. I'm melting in 32 degrees heat in London. I'm through the menopause. I'm through the other side. But the party carries on, I'm afraid, just to make the mood drop a bit. So I've had some post-menopausal issues that they never really flag up to you when you try and get any sort of sense out of them. That's the medical profession. You're not given any warning of that. And I think that's really poor as well, actually, because, I mean, two things I was just going to add to what's been discussed. I actually had a Marina coil fitted just before I sort of hit menopause. And I was having fairly heavy and regular periods. And I was never given an answer about whether I was menopausal. I'd go down and I'd say, oh, I'm feeling a bit funny. And they do a test and they go, well, we think you might be. Or so until that sort of came out. And then I realised no more periods, I'm through it. And I thought, great, that's wonderful. It's liberating. And it did. But you can get, I mean, my issue, and this maybe sorry to share, but it's all useful experience. But I've got post-menopausal sort of urinary tract issues. And the thing, there's some really, it's great that people like you and others are doing stuff now about this and raising awareness, because it is so important, because I'm afraid that, the medical profession has still got a long way to go for 51% of the population. But, a woman, every cell in our bodies as women has estrogen. And when your estrogen levels drop, that affects all of us in different ways. In my case, it's, bladder, urethra thing. Thankfully, they're a lot better than they used to be. And I've been sorted out with some ointment now, and it really does make a difference. But my advice to you is, if you do have issues when you've gone through it, and don't give up, keep getting on at them and get them to give you the right treatment for it, because it doesn't always stop once you're through the other side. For some it does, but we're all different. Sorry, I rambled on a bit there, but
no, do you know what?
No,
that's such a good idea. It's such an interesting thing to mention. And Sue and I are in the process of drawing up what should we discuss in our series 3. And actually, post-menopause and continuing symptoms or different symptoms post-menopause, I think is a very interesting topic that we should stick on our list too. Because that again is something which is never discussed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Do you remember Paula Dale, who was our medical expert, who we had on maybe, the second or third episode? She discussed urinary issues and bladder issues, didn't she? And I remember touching on it at the time and thinking, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. It's one of the many things that Paula Dale discussed, and I went, really? Didn't know about that. But Margaret, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really interesting.
Because some of them are very simple things that can be fixed, and in my case, it can be a nuisance, but actually, and one of the medications is good. I mean, there was a move to make some of the medication over the counter available, and it's a very light dose of HRT ointment, but that sort of thing, women need easy access to that kind of thing. It's not fair, for about 2 years, I was wondering what the hell was wrong with me, and got, worried about going to the end of the road before I needed to go and have a pee again. So yeah. Great. Listen, everybody, I've got to go. I'm so sorry, but it's really good. Thank you for sharing your information, and it's been really interesting. I do a bit of writing for consultant gynecologists and obstetricians in my spare time, so this stuff is really valuable and interesting to hear about, and I can always flag things up as well, resources like yours, your podcast and stuff. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Thank you. Yeah, I totally get that. I feel like my friends and I, now that, you know, we're all comfortable talking about it now, and we joke about the fact that we plan everything according to where the nearest toilet is and how long it is before, how much distance is there between us doing one thing and then being able to go to a toilet and then do the next thing.
A friend of ours always makes sure she books a theatre aisle seat because she knows she's going to have to get up in the middle of the performance, and she's like, well, I don't want to be stuck in the middle of a row. I always make sure I get a seat on the aisle. Just, you know, it's the seat for women over 40. They're all in there.
You know what? I know someone who always used to say, go when you can, not when you need to. And that's never been more relevant or important in my life. Go when you can, not when you need to.
Motto for our times, isn't it? So it
really is.
Absolutely. Jenny just said in the chat, which is spot on, if women know at an earlier age, then they can start looking at nutrition at a younger age, start taking folic acid, additional calcium, etc., to prepare for the onslaught of menopause.
I love the word onslaught.
Onslaught.
Like a big battle.
It does make it sound a little like a siege, doesn't it?
Well, you know, some women are absolutely fine. I've met women who go, oh, I don't know what all the fuss is about. I sailed through it. And you know what? That's brilliant for you. And I'm made up for you. I am really. But for most women will have some kind of symptoms. They'll be somewhere on the spectrum. So yeah, Jenny, you're dead right. You're absolutely right.
But Sue and we spoke to a lady off mic who told us that she was suicidal, didn't she?
We did.
Which was just so shocking, and not just suicidal thoughts. She was on the verge of acting on it, and you just think, oh my word. And fortunately, she managed to get to see a GP in time and sort of, you know, headed it off. But that's how bad it can be for some people compared to others who go, it was absolutely fine. And so I think that the extremes are really extreme when you know, with it. So
yeah, I had a friend who just thought she was losing her mind and just kept getting prescribed antidepressants, and she just kept fighting back and saying no, it again, this is uncharacteristic, something's wrong. And I think she got about 3 GPs and then finally found a specialist that said, don't worry, it's menopause. But yeah, the extremes are absolutely huge. Jenny's saying, I think I'm having them all. My mental health and anxiety is a new issue for me and only appeared in the last 18 months.
I think that's so true of so many people. Like I said about the doom thing, I've never felt that ever before. Just not like that.
Quite often it also collides with lifestyle stuff. So your kids may be leaving home. That's a bit of a whoa, you know, empty nesting going on. You may have put a little bit of weight on, inevitably, because you get a little bit older, and that affects your confidence. So it's not, it kind of all feeds in and into a swirling mess of anxiety, and I get you totally, Jenny. I think it's not just, you can't just say, oh, it's that thing. It's that thing and layered on top of lots of other things going on. You know, whether that's uncertainty in your career or whatever. So yeah, we're with you, Jenny. We are totally with you.
I'm quite anxious about it, frankly.
Yes. Listen, I'm so sorry. I'm quite anxious that I need to go. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
I'm going to leave you in the very capable and ultimately culpable hands of Dawn Collinson. But I need to slide off for a 2 o'clock meeting. But thank you so much for this invitation. I think it's been really, really, really helpful for me. Lovely to meet people. And yeah, very kind of you to invite us. So thank you.
Oh, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
For suggested guests when we do series 3, won't we, Sue?
Absolutely. We'll be back to pester you, most definitely.
Please do. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, everyone, and thanks for your time this afternoon.
Bye
For now.
Bye.
So I think we might have time for one more question or comment before I wrap up, Lauren. Hello.
Go on, shall I go?
Yes,
I
please.
feel I can now safely share. So on Sunday we went to visit some relatives, and it was a 2-hour drive. And when we got there, they'd already left to go down to the pub in time, and I had absolutely no options but go and find myself a bush. Because there was no way I could wait any longer.
Brilliant.
I can't believe they've gone. Oh my god, I can't wait.
I bet you were like that when you. What am I going to do?
I like. I see them driving off. I was just like, oh no, absolutely mortified. Now, my question, am I ever going to get my waist back, or do I just give in and just buy a whole new bunch of skirts?
Yes.
They're sat in the wardrobe.
Give it to Empire Line dressing. Yes. No, do you know what? Well, actually, we spoke to a nutritionist and we spoke to an exercise person in series 2. And they said there are specific exercises that you can do that are targeted at the areas that because you are more prone to putting on weight in certain areas when you're menopausal. And there are specific exercises which you can do. And if I had any memory left, I'd remember the name of the girl who it was. It was a girl called Katie. She was actually from Liverpool, although she now lived down in London, and she was a personal trainer, and she specialised in exercises for menopausal women. And she said, don't give up. So ignore me when I said yes, do. She said, definitely don't. There are things that you can do to address it. Can't remember what they are, obviously, because my memory is like that big now. So that's another thing that went, memory.
Well, what I'm going to do is share the link to the podcast in the chat.
So series 2 has Katie in. So she's the one who talks specifically about exercise.
Great.
I've got her name wrong.
Lauren, I've got you'll probably see them all over Facebook, but it's called a weighted hula hoop. So I've put on a little bit of weight round the middle, and I do think it is because I'm pre-meni, because and I've looked at it for ages, and I was reading the reviews, and I thought, nah, this is going to be absolutely crap. I'm not falling into it. It's about 30 quid, and I thought no. And then the other week I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. You literally do 20 minutes a day of this, and you just put your music on, or you can stand in front of the telly. I've already lost 2 inches off my waist. And
wow.
I have been doing spinning classes, I have been swimming, I have been going to HIIT classes, and nothing is shifting it off my stomach area. And like you, I've got loads of clothes I want to fit back into. But this hula hoop, you basically put it around your waist, and it's got links. And then when it starts to get a bit bigger, you take a link off, and then you keep doing your hula hoops. Well, there's loads of people. So try that one, because I've been trying for probably about 18 months, walking the dog, you name it, and I cannot, doing sit-ups, cannot do it. But this weighted hula hoop is the only thing that is shifting my midriff. So
Karen, send me a link.
I will.
Brilliant.
But it's the only thing. And I was going to the doctors going, I'm trying everything, and I'm toning my arms and my legs are fine, but my stomach area just would not change. But just doing 20 minutes a day, I've already noticed like a huge improvement. So
Karen, how are you toning your arms? Do you know what I've suddenly got? I've got like pensioners forearms. And I say this to Sue all the time. I feel like I've got Judi Dench's forearms. The rest, and I play tennis like at least once a week. And I turned my wrist the other day and thought, oh my God, where did all that loose skin come from?
We just use my friend is a personal trainer, and she just got me on the, the bands. She like the
resistance
just
bands.
Just doing the bands on your arms, front and back, and it'll tone your top up. So that's what I've been doing. I've just been.
Do you attach it to like a door handle?
A door handle, or between, you get quite a heavy one and do it between your 2 arms.
Just like that.
Literally, yeah. But the weighted hula hoop, I did read reviews, and sometimes when I read reviews, I think, are these people that are just trying to sell it? But it actually has. Really, and even my husband, I mean, I have to be quiet because in a room, he's even trying it, and he's losing a little bit off his tummy. So I'm just like, oh well. But
that's a great shout.
You know it's working because you have to take a link off, and then you can. It's getting smaller. So yeah, I will send you the link, Lauren.
But I think anything that we've talked about today, we'll send everybody out, like, because there's been a few different things that people have mentioned.
Yeah, I'm gonna send
find them and send them.
I'm going to send a follow-up email that includes links to sign up for our newsletter. So we send out a weekly newsletter that has all sorts of resources, hints, tips, links to stuff about menopause in the news. We'll put a link to this podcast in. And then, maybe next week's newsletter will have a little section about hula hoops and resistance bands.
Yeah.
But we'll do that. We'll make sure everyone gets signed up. And I think, yes, Dawn, thank you so much for your time. That's been so insightful. We also have a Facebook page, and you can, our newsletter, we're open for if anyone wants to write a blog or send in a shared experience or send photos or anything to keep the conversation going. You're very welcome to, and I'll put details about that in my follow-up email as well. But thank you, everyone. Jenny's got to dash off. Thanks so much, Jenny. But yeah, thank you. It's been absolutely brilliant.